Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet Nashta Prayeshvabhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Yam Pravrajantam Anupetam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayana Virahakatara Juhava Putreti tanmayatayo taravo binedus Tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. So, text number 151 of Madhya Lila, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the verse written by Srila Śrīdhara Svāmī. It's in his commentary to the first verse of the 10th Canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And this particular verse by Śrīdhara Svāmī is repeated in Chaitanya Charitamrita twice. Once in Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita and next time in Madhya Lila. So it's an important verse and it's very appropriate to our topic, the topic of our consideration. We're trying to structurally understand Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the philosophical ideas upon which Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam rests, and what is the message of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. What is the message which Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam or Shukadeva Goswami wants to convey to us? Because sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's said indirectly, rarely it is very clearly delineated. So therefore the analysis is needed, and this analysis will help us to understand all different verses and stories of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and to be enlightened by the message of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So this verse, daśame daśamam lakṣyam āśrita-taśraya-vigraham śrī-kṛṣṇākhyaṁ param dhamma jagat-dhāma namāmi tat. The 10th Canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam reveals the 10th object or subject matter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Daśame, in the 10th Canto, daśamam lakṣyam, the daśama lakṣya, the 10th lakṣya, the 10th goal or the 10th signifier of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is being described. And what is this 10th subject matter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam? Āśrita-taśraya-vigraham. This is the form or manifestation of Āśraya, the shelter for those who are Āśrita, those who are sheltered, those who wants to take shelter. Āśrita-taśraya-vigraham. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada translates the 10th Canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam reveals the 10th object, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of all surrendered souls. Āśrita-taśraya. He is known as Śrī-kṛṣṇa, śrī-kṛṣṇākhyaṁ. He is called Śrī-kṛṣṇa literally. He is said to be Krishna. His name is Krishna. And he is param dhamma. He is the supreme abode, transcendental abode. And jagat-dhāma. He is the abode or the source of this material universe, material world. Namāmi tat. And I am bowing down, I am offering my obeisances to this Krishna, who is āśrita-tāśraya-vigraham, whose name is Krishna, who is param, and at the same time jagat-dhāma. Very beautiful and important verse, which very clearly describes the essence of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the essence of the 10th topic of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Āśraya. Who is Āśraya? Every word in this verse is very important for us to understand the 10th subject matter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And purport by Srila Prabhupada. This is a quotation from Bhagavatam-dīpikā Śrīdhara Svāmī commentary of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 10.1.1. In the 10th Canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, there is a description of Āśraya-tattva, Śrī-kṛṣṇa. There are two tattvas, Āśraya-tattva and āśrita-tattva. Āśraya-tattva is the objective, and āśrita-tattva is the subjective. So Āśraya-tattva is Krishna, who is the goal, who is the shelter, and we are āśrita, subjective part. We are in need of taking shelter. Since the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the shelter of all devotees, Śrī Kṛṣṇa is called param. In the Bhagavad-gītā, it is stated, param brahma, param dhamma, pavitram, paramam bhavan. So for the devotees, Śrī Kṛṣṇa is param dhamma. For the conditioned souls, Śrī Kṛṣṇa is jagat-dhāma. For those people who know that their home, dhamma, actually dhamma means home also, means abode or home. And in Russian, home называется дом. Dhamma, dom. So the same word is used. So for those whose home is spiritual world, the devotees, for them Krishna is param. For those whose home is this material world, conditioned souls, Krishna is still the supreme ruler, and therefore he is called here jagat-dhāma. So it's indirectly indicated there are two types of souls in this world. Those who want to go back home, back to Godhead, and those who want to stay back home in the material world. In the Bhagavad-gītā 10.12, it is stated, param brahma, param dhamma, pavitram, paramam dhamam. Everything is resting under the lotus feet of Krishna. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam it is stated, samasritaya pada palava plavam, mahat padam punyaya sho murarihe. Under the lotus feet of Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the entire Mahat Tattva is existing. Since everything is under Krishna's protection, Śrī Kṛṣṇa is called Āśraya-tattva. So he is Āśraya for the spiritual world and he is Āśraya for the material world because everything is under his feet. Everything else is called āśrita-tattva. The material creation is also called āśrita-tattva. Liberation from material bondage and the attainment of the spiritual platform is also called āśrita-tattva. Krishna is the only Āśraya-tattva. In the beginning of the creation, there are Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. They are also Āśraya-tattva. Krishna is the cause of all causes, Sarva Karana Karanam. To understand Krishna perfectly, one has to make an analytical study of Āśraya-tattva and āśrita-tattva. So I will read a few more verses because they are all very important till the verse number 158. But they have very small purports. Krishna Svarupa Vichara Shuna Sanatan. Hey Sanatan, please listen from me the Svarupa Vichar, the consideration or description of Krishna's Svarup, or explanation rather of Krishna Swarup. Advaya Jnana Tattva Vraja Vrajendra Nandan. He is Advaya Jnana Tattva, he is non-dual consciousness, and he is in Vraj, Vrajendra Nandan. Sarva Adi, Sarva Amshi, Kishora Shekhar, Chidananda Deha, Sarva Shraya, Sarveshwar. Krishna is the original source of everything, Sarva Adi. Sarva Amshi, he is sum total of everything. He is Amshi, not Amsha, not the part, he is the sum total. Kishora Shekhar, he appears as the supreme use, and his whole body is composed of spiritual bliss, Chidananda Deha. Sarvashraya, and therefore he is the shelter of everything, Sarvashraya, and Sarveshwara. He is the master of everyone. Purport. Krishna is the origin of all Vishnu tattvas, including Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. He is the ultimate goal of Vaishnava philosophy. Well, Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Others, they may not know it so clearly. Everything emanates from him. His body is completely spiritual and the source of all spiritual being. Although he is the source of everything, he himself has no source. Advaitam achyutam anadim anantarupam adyam purana purusham navayovanam cha. Although he is the supreme source of everyone, he is still always a fresh use. And next is famous verse from Brahma Samhita. Ishvarah paramah Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govindah Sarvakarana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme controller. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. Svayam Bhagavan Krishna Govinda Paranam Sarvaishvarya Purna Yandra Golaka Nityadham. The original Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna. His original name is Govinda. He is full of all opulences, and his eternal abode is known as Goloka Vrindavan. Ete cham shakalach pumsach Krishna stu Bhagavan Svayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. All these incarnations of Godhead are either plenary portions of or parts of the plenary portions of the Purusha avatars, but Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. In every age, he protects the world through his different features when the world is disturbed by the enemies of Indra. Jnana Yoga Bhakti Teen Sadanera Vashe Brahma Atma Bhagavan Trivida Prakashe. There are three kinds of spiritual processes for understanding the absolute truth: the process of speculative knowledge, mystic yoga, and bhakti. According to these three processes, the absolute truth is manifested as Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. And the last verse which I will read today is again the famous verse from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 2nd chapter, 1st canto. Vadanti tat-tattva vidas tattvam yajñānam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This is a quotation from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1-11. Those who are interested in the impersonal Brahman effulgence, which is not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can attain that goal by speculative knowledge. Those who are interested in practicing mystic yoga can attain the localized aspect of Paramatma. As stated in the Bhagavad-gītā, Ishvarah sarva bhutanam hriddeshe arjuna tishtati. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated within the heart as Paramatma. He witnesses the activities of the living entities and gives them the permission to act. For further explanation, see Adi Lila chapter 2, verse number 11. And Prabhupada definitely, it's implied that those who are interested in the personal feature of God, they should employ the process of bhakti yoga. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swāmī Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Tarine Vanchakalpatarubhescha Kripasindubhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Advaita Gadadhara Śrīvāsadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ajanulam Vitibhujo Kanakavadatu Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksha Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Yugadharma Pava Vande Jagat Priya Karo Karunavatar Yantah Pravishya Mama Yantah Pravishya Yantah Pravishya Yantah Pravishya Mama Vachim Imam Prasuptam Sanjivayata Kila Shakti Darak Swadhamna Anyam Shahasta Charana Shravanat Vakadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Svasyasta Vishwasya Kalach Prasidatam Dayantu Bhutani Shivam Mithodya Manascha Badram Bhajata Tadokshaje Aveshyatam No Matirapyahai Tuki. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, listeners of these classes. I am very grateful to you for giving me this opportunity to speak about Krishna. And we're making a little jump in our discussion of the structural discussion of the topics of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. We last time discussed the third canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the very important message of the third canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which explains the nature of this material world, that this material world is caused by the Supreme Lord. Even though it may look differently, it may appear differently, it may have some deficiencies of some lack or some bad qualities. Nevertheless, it's the Supreme Lord Himself, and that's a very important message of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. We are trying to understand Adoksaja, who is not available to our senses, by studying something which is available to our senses, which is perceivable by our senses, that is material nature, and trying to induce or deduce or understand into it the source of this material nature, and to understand the nature of this source. So ultimately, all these cantos, which we will go one after another, lead us to the 10th canto. And the 10th canto is describing this Āśraya-tattva. But, and here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining this Āśraya-tattva to Srila Sanatana Goswami. And we will start our discussion from the end of this series of verses. To understand Āśraya-tattva, to understand the 10th canto, to understand the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, actually we have to understand only two verses. These two verses of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam are the key verses. They are the keys by which all other verses become very clear, the whole composition becomes very clear. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami, he compares this two verses, specifically one verse, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam, or half a verse, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam, Eticham Shekalach Pumsach Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam, with a lamp. And he says that the lamp may be standing in one place, but so many different objects is being illuminated by this one lamp. So even though this verse, particular verse, one of the most important verses of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, is stated only once in the first canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, this verse is illuminating the entire book. So the most important two verses of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam for us, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, upon which the whole explanation of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, very clear and brilliant explanation of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, very lucid, which has never been given before, which was actually revealed by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These two verses, or even 1.5 verse, is this Vadanti tattvam vidas, tattvam yajnanam advayam, prameti paramatmeti bhagavaneti shabdyate, and the second half of the verse is Eticham Shekalach Pumsach Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. So we will continue our topic of structural understanding of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam on the basis of these two verses, and I will try to explain these two verses very briefly because this is a very big topic. But again, if I understand these two verses, everything. If I understand thoroughly, the problem is that we think we know these verses. But if I understand them very clearly, we will see Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and in fact, not only Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, our own life, our own soul, our own body, the whole material world in a completely different way. So we'll start with the first verse, which is 11th verse of the first canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, second chapter. Vadanti tattvā vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam. Srila Jiva Goswami, it's really amazing. Srila Jiva Goswami explains this particular verse in two huge books. He starts explanation of this verse in the first Sandarbha, Tattva Sandarbha. He devotes the complete Bhagavata Sandarbha and Paramatma Sandarbha to explain basically the second part of this verse, Vadanti tattvam vidas. It's this huge books, two big books, Bhagavata Sandarbha and Paramatma Sandarbha, just to explain this verse. And then he writes Krishna Sandarbha, and the whole Krishna Sandarbha is his explanation or commentary of this verse, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. So the entire analysis of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by Srila Jiva Goswami is based on the understanding of these two verses. And the first verse is spoken by Sutta Goswami, and the previous verse, the 10th verse of the first canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Kamasya Nendriya Pritir, in the previous verse, Sutta Goswami says that Kamasya Nendriya Pritir labho jiveta yavata, that when one is living in this world, he should not make the sense gratification as his goal, because this is a completely useless process. You know, you can gratify your senses, and go nowhere. So it's not the goal of life. What is the goal of life? This is very important verse because he says that the goal of life is tattva jigyasa, jivasya tattva jigyasa. The life is meant to understand tattva. The life is meant to understand truth. The life is not meant to gratify the senses, because everyone is gratifying senses. All other species of life are much better in gratifying their senses. Hogs and dogs, they're much more suited. Their bodies is much more, more suitable to, to take enjoyment. because they don't need, they can take enjoyment anywhere. They are very, they're very happy creatures, especially hogs. I can see them everywhere in Vrindavan. They're very happy. They don't need much for their sense gratification. They're happy. But jivasya tattva jigyasa, the life should not be wasted for this sense gratification. The essence of life, the goal of life is to understand tattva. And we all know that this thirst for knowledge, this inquisitiveness, this desire to understand the truth is there. Like yesterday we celebrated Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, and one devotee, one sannyasi, Russian sannyasi, he told his story. He said he first got Ishopanishad and read Ishopanishad by Srila Prabhupada, and he says that it's amazing, I read this small book and I suddenly realized that my whole life I was looking for this, even though I never knew that I was looking for this. But when I read this very clear understanding of the message, the goal of life and everything has become very clear. I understood, yes, this is what I was looking for without knowing what I was looking for. So everyone is instinctively, intuitively is looking to understand the truth. It's true. We can, everyone is looking for Krishna. Everyone is looking for tattva, but nobody knows where the tattva is. Therefore, stating this, jivasya tattva jigyasam, that the goal of life is tattva jigyasa, to inquire about the absolute truth. Śrīla Sutta Goswami says, what is the absolute truth? Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajñānam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. This is the solemn declaration. What is absolute truth? Absolute truth is advaya jnana. And the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is there to explain what is this Advaya-tattva or Advaya-jnana, non-dual consciousness. What is non-dual consciousness? And first, please bear with me, I will definitely speak about the Leelas, beautiful Leelas of Krishna Janma, but we have a philosophical discussion, so please bear with me. I will speak now hardcore philosophy. What is Advaya-tattva? This is a very big subject matter. What is Advaya-tattva or Advaya-jnana? Non-dual consciousness. So everyone is looking for this non-dual consciousness, but usually people, when we start speaking about non-dual consciousness, which is the source of everything, they say that non-dual consciousness is some abstract consciousness, contentless consciousness, which is devoid of object, which has no object, the consciousness which is not conscious about even himself and not conscious about everything else. It's just pure consciousness. It's a very strange concept, and therefore it's very difficult to understand, but this is what Advaita Vadis are talking when they speak about Advaya Jnana, and when they see these words Advaya Jnana, they become very excited and they say Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is about Advaya Jnana. And we also say Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is about Advaya Jnana. In fact, Srila Jiva Goswami, let me remind to you or tell you about the logic of Srila Jiva Goswami's analysis or presentation of philosophy. First, Srila Jiva Goswami in Tattva Sandarbha, he explains that the highest pramana, the highest evidence, the highest revelation of truth is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The truth is revealed in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in the most complete way. This is the first part of Tattva Sandarbha, where he explains epistemology of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And in the second part, he starts describing the subject matter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And he explains the vision, the samadhi of Srila Vyasadeva, from which the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam was revealed to the world. And then he says that he quotes this verse, the first part of this verse, Vadanti tat tattvam vidas, tattvam yajñānam advayam. The whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is describing this Advaya Gyan. So again, Advaya Gyan, understood by Brahmavadis or Advaitavadis, is completely different concept than what we understand. They think that this is very pure, sort of completely objectless consciousness when there is no notion of I, there is no notion of personality. Because if there is if there is understanding of self, it means that there is something else. And if you say that there is I, it means that there is something else, and as soon as there is something else, there is no Advaya. Advaya means no I, according to them. Because if you say I, it means there is somebody else. If there is somebody else, there is no Advaya. The whole Advaya concept is crumbled, is totally, completely destroyed immediately when we say that Brahman has personality, has I-hood or selfhood. But Vaishnavas say, no, this is wrong. This is completely wrong. This is not true. This is completely artificial. There is no such substance which doesn't have I, which doesn't have personality. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to surmise that the original truth is without selfhood. The selfhood is very essential part of the absolute truth. How is that? And therefore, Prabhupada, he is proclaiming this Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this Advaya Gyan, which is being talked about here in this verse, is different because it is said here, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaneti Shabdyate. It's called Bhagavan, and Bhagavan means person. And Brahman can never be called Bhagavan according to Advaitavadis, because Bhagavan is a person and Brahman is impersonal realization, is the highest truth. It cannot be, and Bhagavan is the lower concept. They introduce duality. So what is our conception? Please, I know it's maybe a little difficult, but I will try to make it very simple. So our conception of Advaya Gyan or non-dual consciousness is different. When we say Advaya Gyan, we say, why it is Advaya? We say Advaya Gyan has personality. It has I. And it basically means that there is somebody who is not I, but it does not destroy its non-dual nature. Why it doesn't destroy its non-dual nature? Because Srila Jiva Goswami gives three reasons, or three conditions by which Krishna, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, becomes Advaya-tattva or Advaya Gyan. First of all, he is the only tattva which is independent, which doesn't have any other causes. He is unique and he is Advaya because he is the only one who is self-caused. Everyone else has some other cause behind him. We have our cause, our father, mother, they have our father, their father, mother, so on and so forth. Everyone has some cause. Krishna is sarva karana karanam. He doesn't have any cause. And then he says the next condition to be called Advaya Gyan is that all his energies, he's supported by energies who are his own energies. His support, his existence, he has energies, he has qualities, he has attributes, but his existence within these energies is not dependent on somebody else. It's his own energies. like we have so many qualities, so many energies, but these qualities and energies are not exactly ours. You know, if we examine our personality, we will understand that our personality is a very, very strange sort of thing. You know, we took something from here, something from there. You know, this is the content of our consciousness. But again, this is the second condition, that all the energies are his energies. There is no extraneous needed for his support. He's supporting himself by his energies, but this is his energies. Atma Maya. This is my Maya, Atma Maya, his own Maya. I'm coming here in this world, but I'm coming by my own energy. And the third condition is that all these energies, on the contrary, have no independent existence. They cannot exist without Bhagavan. This is what we call Advaya Gyan. Why he is Advaya? Because there is nobody like him. There is nobody second. Advaya means no second like him. Yes, there are seconds. I'm there, you are there, he is there. So many brahmacharis are there, so many 7 billion people are there, so many mosquitoes are there, so many frogs are there, hogs are there. But they are not self-caused, they are not independent, they cannot exist independently of him, and their energies are not their own energies, they're borrowing energies. So there is only one Advaya Gyan, unique, ekam eva advitiyam. If the whole Upanishads and Vedic literature would be speaking about that there is only Brahman who exists, why, please tell me, if you know little Sanskrit, please answer this simple question. Why Chandogya Upanishad says, ekam eva advitiyam? If there was only one thing which would exist, was there, and everything else was illusion, as Mayavadis or Advaitavadis say, that Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam, Jiva Brahmasya na paraha, Jiva is Brahman and there is only one Brahman, there is only one thing which exists, nothing else exists, then for Upanishad it would be enough to say ekam. There would be no need to say ekam eva advitiyam. But Upanishad says ekam, yes, he is one, and advitiyam, there is nobody like him. There is nobody else like him. When we speak about Advaya Gyan, it's a different concept. I hope you're still following me. But it's important to understand first the tattva, otherwise we will never understand who is Krishna. We first have to understand this, that Advaya tattva, according to us, is this non-dual consciousness, which is the source of everything else, which is the support of everything else, and which is self-supported entity, which nevertheless has the personality, has the I-hood or selfhood, and he is the person. So this is what we have to understand, and now it's very important. It's perhaps the most important things in this section of my talk now. Please listen very carefully. What is explained here is that this one substance, one truth, which is the object of everyone's inquiry, the object of everyone's search, which everyone is actually looking for. Everyone is needed because everyone feels that he is incomplete without the connection, yoga, with this original entity or original person. We feel our dependence on him. So this one substance is revealed differently according to the attitude of the devotee, according to the attitude of the person. this non-dual substance, which is one, revealed in three different ways. Brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. It doesn't say here bhagavan iti vidyate, or bhagavan iti, how you say, you may say it in many different ways, but it is specifically said here, shabdyate. It's being spoken about as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahmeti, Brahma iti. He is called Brahman. Paramatma iti. He is called Paramatma. Bhagavan iti. Shabdyate. He is spoken about. In other words, everyone who is speaking about different realizations, different spiritual realization, is speaking about the same essence, but this same essence is understood differently by different people according to their attitude, their conception, and their sadhana, their doctrine, orthodoxy, and their practice, orthopraxis. Please, this is the most important thing which I want to say today, that the way how the absolute truth will be revealed to us depends on our doctrine, our conception, our understanding, who is the absolute truth, and our practice. These two things together will facilitate us to ultimately realize the Supreme Absolute Truth in its highest form. So, and it is said, here Srila Prabhupada explains, and Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very clearly says, Jnana Yoga Bhakti Tina Sadaniravaše Brahma Atma Bhagavan Trivida Prakashe. Then, you know, if you employ the process of Jnana, if you employ the process of Advaita Jnana, of Jnana Yoga, meditating on this non-dual consciousness, then at one point when your doctrine will become your realization. It is in this verse, it is said, Vadanti tattva vidas. Those who really know the tattva, those who realize the tattva. In other words, it's all real. Brahman is real. There is nothing wrong with Brahman. Brahman realization, it's a very real and it's a very important stage of realization of Bhagavan. It's real understanding. It's not false understanding. So if you are inclined, and one more important thing here, your practice and your concept very much depend on the level of your surrender. Your concept will require a certain level of surrender. Why people cannot really take to Bhakti Yoga? Because they cannot surrender. It's very difficult for them to surrender. They know if God is person, I have to surrender, and they don't want to surrender. Therefore, they have different concepts. So these three things are important. Our concept, the level of surrender or readiness to surrender, and the practice according to this extent of our surrender. Because even devotees, we may have proper concept, orthodox. We may understand what is the practice to realize this truth. But if we don't have the appropriate extent of surrender, our practice will be very weak. So these three considerations we have always to remember, because this is what Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is all about. So let's go a little further. Those devotees, they're also devotees, because to realize even Brahman, you have to be a devotee. You have to mix some elements of bhakti in your practice. You cannot realize Brahman purely by the means of Advaita Jnana, by Jnana Yoga. Without element of bhakti, you cannot do this. Only by Jnana Mishra Bhakti, you can realize Brahman. But anyway, what is Brahman? Brahman is this sort of realization when you have this proclivity, this tendency this inclination that the truth must be impersonal. You have this concept. You use the methods of jnana yoga, which is meditation on these koans, so to speak, on these vakyas, mahavakyas of Upanishads. Evam, oh my goodness. Evam eva advitiya, ekam eva advitiya, and so on and so forth. Aham brahmasmi, and all these mahavakyas. And then what will happen to you, at one point you will see the light. This very effulgent light, and Prabhupada actually explains that when you go from the dark room on a very bright light, when the very bright sun, and you have been in a dark room for a few days, you didn't see the sun, you were in a complete darkness, and all of a sudden you go outside and you see the dark light. You will not be able to see the sun itself. You will only be able to see the effulgence of the sun. You will be blinded by this effulgence. So in the similar way, when we are in this darkness of ignorance and we're trying to meditate on the Supreme Truth, at one point the revelation of Supreme Truth takes place within our heart, and when the Supreme Truth reveals Himself within our heart, initially we're completely blinded. We don't see the Supreme Truth, we only see the effulgence. Therefore, in this Upanishad it is said, please remove this effulgence so that I could see you face to face. This is an initial stage, preliminary stage, incomplete stage of understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, you can say it's indistinct understanding of the Supreme Truth. Indistinct. Like I was today, while preparing this class, I was looking in the folio and I searched for this word, indistinct, and there's a lot of indistinct in the folio, and I was wondering why this not very common word is so widely used in folio. And then I realized that whenever Srila Prabhupada speaks something indistinctly, in the transcription of his speech, there is, in brackets, indistinct. So in the same way, indistinct, when we don't understand clearly the Supreme Truth, we say it's Brahman. It's an understanding. It's a very huge realization. We should not really underestimate it. It's a very amazing realization when we all of a sudden see that the whole creation has the light behind it, and this light is the light of Brahman. But this experience is incomplete experience. It's indistinct realization that we don't understand the Supreme Truth clearly. But this is the same Supreme Truth. Brahman and Bhagavan, they're not different from each other. They're not, because it's the same entity, Advaya Gyan. It's not that there is Paramatma separately, Brahman separately, and then Bhagavan separately. No, this is one entity which is realized differently, but different seekers. And then, which is very important, the next, if we employ yoga process, and of course, if we take this Brahman realization or Advaitavadis, they also have different conceptions. Some say that we should realize God as Virat Rup, and they meditate on Virat Rup, and they realize Virat Rup. They understand that this is the source of everything. They see the universe differently than us. As I said last class, that we see the universe, or materialists see the universe, or the view of universe is to make it exploitable. But they see Virat Rup. They see that this is the, or sometimes they see that one God, he's like sun god and moon god and Indra and all these different aspects of one reality. So there are different concepts again. It's a very it's a very complex situation, but still they ultimately understand that there is one indistinct reality behind this, and this is the Brahman realization. And Srila Prabhupada explains this in Bhagavad-gītā in the 13th chapter, where he says, Ekatvena prithaktvinā, I don't remember now this verse. He describes different methods of different sadhanas by which you can understand the one truth differently. So that's, again, the most important thing. Depending on your practice, you will get the appropriate level of realization. So the next is yoga, and yoga, they realize personality, they realize Ishvara. Like Srila Prabhupada, he quotes here Bhagavad-gītā, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriddesha arjuna tishtati. Krishna himself says, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriddesha arjuna tishtati. Arjuna, Ishvara, God, is within the heart of every living entity. He doesn't say, I am in the heart of every living entity. He wants, in this particular verse, to make distinction that there is a different realization. There is Bhagavan in his complete form, and there is Ishvara. Ishvara is Paramatma. Ishvara is God for this world. When we don't understand the difference between the source and the energy, which is coming from the source, this sort of realization is called Brahman realization. We come to a very, powerful entity. We try to realize this powerful entity, but the only thing which we see is his power. And when we see their power, this power, this is Brahman realization. When we see the personality who has the power, but we only see the distinction, we only see the personality and his material power. The personality of God for this world, then we realize Paramatma. So by the process of Ashtanga Yoga, by the Ashtanga Yoga meditation, by gradually detaching oneself from this body, by calming down the mind, by going deeper and deeper and deeper, we will be able to see Paramatma, which is God, personality of Godhead, immanent to this world. He is God for this world. But this is not complete realization because, if we, and usually religions, they say that God created this world and then he realized that there is no place for him in this world and he's hiding somewhere behind the cloud and, and we are making mess in this world. So, but it's not like this. God has his own world. But God for this world is called Paramatma, Ishvara. He is the supreme controller. He speaks about this in 9th chapter of Bhagavad-gītā, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sachara. He speaks in the 18th chapter, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hriddesha Arjuna Tishtati. He says, I'm controlling everything in this material world. I'm this Paramatma. And you can realize me if you understand how this material energy works. Actually, what yogis do, by meditating upon the content of their heart, by understanding what's going on, they start realizing how everything is controlled by God. They can understand, they can see karma. Like yogis, they can sometimes they read your destiny, they can understand the intricacies of time, they become sarvakalagya, trikalagya, they see the past, present and future, they can read your thoughts. Why? Because they, by meditating on these powers which created this world, they develop material powers which are relevant to our material existence. Sometimes the people have this conception that if you are a saintly person, sadhu, you have to read the palms. Yesterday one devotee told the story about Srila Prabhupada, how one Indian man asked Srila Prabhupada, "Can you read my palm?" And Srila Prabhupada says, "No, I'm not doing this." But the man was insisting, so Prabhupada starting looking very carefully at his palm, and he said, yeah, please, give me some light. And he says, "I don't see anything good. I don't see anything good." And the person started shaking in his boots. Nothing good is there. And then when, the man became completely frantic, says, "Oh, the only thing which I see is birth, old age, disease, and death. This is what is written in your palm." So that's exactly what yogis do. And that's exactly what people think you should achieve. By meditating on Krishna, who is controlling this world, you also develop certain little powers to control this world, and you see the karma of living entities. You can read the karma of living entities. But ultimately, what is the use of reading this karma of living entities? Because, I remember when we just started preaching openly in Soviet Union, in Russia, when Soviet Union collapsed and it became free. One highly placed official came to the temple and he said, "I read your books, I liked your books, but I think you should start making some predictions," because at that time in the Soviet Union there was very popular. There was some astrologers making big shows, and there was millions and millions of people watching them. Before that it was strictly prohibited, and all of a sudden it was allowed, and everyone was watching Kasparovsky or some other guys who were doing something. So this guy came to our temple and he said, "For you to become popular, you have to start making predictions." And then I said, yes, I can make predictions to you. And he became very excited. He said, yes, really? What can you say? Yes, I said, "You will die." At one point, you will die. He was very disappointed. He didn't like this prediction. But ultimately, this is what it's all about. Ultimately, those people who are going through this, they only realize little tiny portions of Paramatma energy, because they're only interested in relationship between God and this world. They're not interested in God for himself. And therefore, one of the most important and famous verses from Rig Veda is about this Om Tad Vishnoh Paramam Padam Pashyanti Om Tad Vishnoh Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surayaha Tad Viprayo Jagrivam So Tad Viprayo Jagrivam Sa Vishnor Yat Paramam Padam. So this is a very important verse from Rig Veda. Why it is important? Because it is said that those people who are enlightened, Jagrivam Sah, who are awakened, whose consciousness is really awakened, Om Tad Vishnoh Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surayaha. This Surayaha, this Brahmanas, these enlightened persons, they see the spiritual world. Again, those people who are interested in God, but they're only interested in God, in relationship with this world, they can only realize Paramatma. They can only realize this feature of God, which is controlling feature of God. And therefore, people sometimes say that God is the supreme judge. God has nothing to do with this judgment business. It's boring to judge all the time, And they think that God is sitting there on the throne and saying, "You're bad and you're good, and you will go to hell and you will go to heaven." No, Those surayaha, sada pashyanti surayaha, they see paramam padam. Om tad vishnoh paramam padam. They see paramam padam, the world of Krishna, the world of Vishnu, the spiritual world. In other words, they see God in relationship to spiritual reality. This is higher conception. The higher conception is said here, Bhagavan, Bhagavan iti shabdyate. Who is Bhagavan? Bhagavan, what is the difference between Bhagavan and Paramatma, Bhagavan and Ishvara? Bhagavan is God for himself, Ishvara is God for this world. Ishvara is the Lord of this world, Bhagavan is for himself. And because we are so egocentric, therefore we are much more interested in God for this world rather than in God for himself. Therefore, only rare people, they can see Sadapashyanti Surayaha and Jagrivam Sak Samindate. They also show this to others. They are capable of showing to others the spiritual world, that there is a spiritual reality. Don't confine yourself to this material world, because this material world is not all in all. Don't confine yourself to this concept of God, which is immanent to this material world. God is transcendental to this material world, and for him and in him there is this paramam padam. And therefore, in the first verse which we read, in this beautiful verse, it is specifically said that śrī-kṛṣṇākhyaṁ param dhamma. He is param dhamma. He is the supreme shelter of everything. And he is jagat-dhāma. He is both. He is the source of this world. But most importantly for us, if we want to understand, if we want to have higher conception of God, then we have to understand that he is also param dhamma, that there is this higher higher abode of the Lord, which is spiritual world. So now we came to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan, this is the highest realization. We have to very clearly understand that Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti Shabdyate, this is in sequence the preliminary understanding, indistinct understanding, much more clear understanding when we see relationship between God and his energies, but only between his material energies. And then Bhagavan, the highest realization, when we will be able to see the relationship between God and his spiritual energies. What is God in the spiritual world? What is he doing? How he's like? What he likes, what he doesn't like, what he's enjoying in the spiritual world. That's Bhagavan. But in Bhagavan, again, we have two conceptions. When we preliminary approach Bhagavan, when our vision becomes very clear because of practice of Bhakti Yoga, which starts with the chanting of the holy name, when we start doing this, then we will gradually realize, yes, God is there, and God is not only in this world, God is not only in my heart, God is also in the spiritual world. But the first understanding of God is very great and I am very tiny. And that's a very important understanding because it gives you impetus to surrender to him. But this Aishwarya-mai Gyan, understanding of God, is not the highest understanding. What we're talking about, again, the concept of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which facilitates us to understand the highest aspect of God. As I said, there should be concept, there should be appropriate sadhana, and there should be appropriate level of surrender. So the higher the concept, the more difficult is sadhana, difficult in a sense that it requires higher degree of surrender. When we are talking about Brahma Gyan or meditation on Advaita nature of, on Brahman, on Advaita Brahman, then there is no need to surrender. There is hardly any need to surrender. Little surrender should be there because, as I said, the element of bhakti should be there even to realize Brahman. The practice of Ashtanga Yoga is much more difficult because, as Patanjali Muni in Yoga Sutra himself says, to realize Brahman, to enter into Samadhi, he says, Ishvara Pranidhanava. You have to surrender to Ishvara. He says, this is a very easy way, relatively easy way to enter or to reach this Samadhi stage if you just do Pranidhana. Pranidhana means total, complete surrender. But still, you want to have some certain power, you have to have some certain independence, you're still very much immersed in this material world. But the understanding of Bhagavan for himself means that all of a sudden you're nobody. You're nobody. You have to surrender wholesale, completely, absolutely, without any self-will. You have to be dependent on his will completely. No separateness or no separate will remains in the spiritual world. But in the spiritual world, again, as I said, there are two levels of realization. The lower realization is this Aishwarya Gyan, when we realize God as Narayan, as Shadaishwarya Purna, Aishwaryasya Samagrasya Viryasya Shasak Shriya, who is God, who is person. Person God is one who has all these 6 opulences. And the main opulence is Shri. But Shri means sweetness. Shri means beauty. So the highest realization, when you realize this, or when the devotee realizes the sweetness of the Lord, or Madhurya Maya Gyan, which also has its gradations. So basically what we see, please listen very carefully, it's a very important point, and then within the next few minutes, which are still remaining, I will tell you some leelas, which are very important. But I wanted to tell more leelas today because it's Janmashtami special, as you said. But I also wanted to tell you some philosophy, which is also important, I think. So please, when we speak about Brahman, it's one. When we speak about Paramatma, it's also one. There is no different Paramatmas. Those who realize Brahman, they see this indistinct effulgence of God. Those who realize Paramatma, they realize one. Well, maybe sometimes they speak about 3 Paramatmas. Kshiradakashaya Vishnu, Garbhadakashaya Vishnu, and Karanadakashaya Vishnu. 3 aspects of Paramatma, one higher than another. That's possible. When we speak about Bhagavan, we speak about huge varieties of form of Bhagavan. It's a completely different story. When we go to Brahman, it's one Brahman. When we go to Paramatma, one Paramatma, everything is clear. When we go to Bhagavan, nothing is clear. Kurma is there, and Nrisimhadev is there, and Varahadev is there, and Parashuram is there, and Narada Muni is there, and Vyasadev is there, and Guru Maharaj is there, Sakshat Daritvina Samasta Shastra, and who else is not there? Everything is there. So whom should I surrender? Who is the higher form of all the forms of Bhagavan? Whom should I worship? Yes, if I understand this clearly, this is the message of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. I have to understand this message very clearly. Okay, it's clear that we shouldn't worship Brahman. Brahman is the lower sort of realization, lower path. It's clear we shouldn't worship Paramatma and we shouldn't go through this yoga path. But when we come to bhakti, so what should we do? Because there are so many, again, varieties of bhakti. And there is Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. Which one we should do? So for that, the second verse is there, which is quoted here by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ete chamsha kalah pumsah Krishna stu Bhagavan Svayam. The second most important verse of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the first most important verse of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam explains this concept of Advaya Gyan, which I tried to explain. But the second verse explains the relationship between the different forms of Bhagavan. Ete, Cha, Amsha, and Kala. There are many different forms of Bhagavan which manifest the powers of Bhagavan partially. They Amsha or Kala. They only manifest little parts of the potency of Bhagavan. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, but Swayam Bhagavan is Krishna. The Bhagavan himself, God himself, with all his powers, God with all his powers, the highest conception of God is Krishna. And that's definitely the message of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And how do you realize Krishna? You can realize Krishna in two different ways. You can realize Krishna in his opulent form, and you can realize Krishna in his sweet form. And again, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam provides for this and explains to us by the method of negation, by understanding different methods, different concepts and appropriate sadhanas. We have to negate the lower concepts and lower sadhanas, and ultimately adopt the highest concept and the highest sadhana. And the 10th canto starts explaining the highest way to realize Krishna and the highest conceptions of Krishna. And therefore, the day before yesterday, we were celebrating Janmashtami. Janmashtami is the day when Krishna reveals himself. From the historical perspective, he reveals himself when he comes to this world and he becomes visible to all the people of this world, like, when all of a sudden Adoksaja becomes Akshaja. When Adoksaja becomes the object of our vision, that's Avatar. Krishna comes. But why Krishna is the highest form of Bhagavan? I will explain a little later. But again, the day before yesterday, we celebrated his appearance day from the historical perspective. But ultimately, these descriptions in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is very important, is the descriptions of how to make his appearance within our heart. These descriptions of Krishna's appearing in the prison cell of Kamsa and simultaneously appearing in the maternity of Nanda Maharaj from Yashoda are also indicative of how to make appearance of Krishna within our heart. Otherwise, there would not be, or of course there would be value of these descriptions, but these descriptions are much more valuable also because they give very important indications and hints how we should realize Bhagavan. So we can see a very interesting phenomenon because Krishna, in the darkness of night, in the 8th day of the dark part of the month of Bhadrapada, he appears simultaneously in two places. And what is the meaning? What is the significance of this? First of all, why does Krishna appear at night, at 12 of night? We all know we have to fast till 12 of night. It's just impossible. It's just, Why doesn't he mercifully reveal himself like Lord Ramachandra at 12 o'clock at noon? Very important significance. Krishna reveals himself at night. And we can understand this only if we remember the verse from the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad-gītā, where Krishna says, for those sages, introspective sages, what is the day for every living entities is the night for introspective sages. And what is the night for them, what is the day for them is the night for every living entities. The night here means that to realize God, we have to minimize our connection with this world. We have to go deep inside ourselves. We will not be able to realize God if our senses are fully active and interacting with this world, trying to enjoy by the objects, sense objects of this world. This is one very important teaching in regard to Janmashtami. Krishna appears deep at night, in the darkest night, when there is nothing else but the moon of his mercy shining from the sky. It is also said that even though it was Ashtami and there was only half moon, at that moment of time, the full moon was shining from the sky. The full mercy was there upon everyone because Krishna Chandra himself descended to this world. And how he descends to this world, it's also very important. He descends to this world in the prison cell of Kamsa. Who is Kamsa? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada says that Kamsa is the fear of material existence. Fear of birth, death, old age, and disease. This is Kamsa. And when we realize the miserable nature of this world, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he says that Madhura signifies mixture of bhakti and jnana. So we're talking about a specific process, how to realize specific aspect of God, which is the opulent aspect of God, where the jnana or knowledge of Godhood or his opulence is very prominent. So for that, we need to fear the repetition of birth and death. We need to understand that this world is not a nice place, it's a hopeless place, and in this place, the birth, death, old age, and disease are constantly being repeated, and we will suffer. So that's the fear, and this fear will put us into the prison cell. Sometimes devotees, they feel like in prison because they were free birds in this material world. They were flying very happily. They were eating everything. They're doing all kinds of nonsense. And all of a sudden, you know, this you shouldn't do, and this you shouldn't do, and this you shouldn't do, and that you shouldn't do. And what should I do? You should eat prasadam and chant Hare Krishna and be happy. How I can be happy if I don't do anything? So that's prison. What is prison? Prison. What is there? Please mute your microphone. So, this prison is the rules and regulations of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, what is Vaidhi? Vaidhi is from the word Vidhi. Vidhi is the rules of scriptures, and scriptures, they always say no, 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 no. They say yes, yes, yes too. But there are so many no there. That's the prison. You know, you're very restricted. You cannot really go here and there. Therefore, Krishna, he appears in the prison cell of Vasudeva and Devaki. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purports that before that, Shatgarbhasura, one after another, entered the womb of Devaki. And it basically means that all the anarthas have to be killed. And Kamsa, the fear of material existence, kills one after another. If we are fearful of material existence, we will not be happy, sense enjoyers. We will be very careful in this. We will be very restricted as far as our karma is concerned, our lust is concerned, our anger is concerned, and so on and so forth. We will understand. Gradually, all these things, one after another, will die out, will be weakened. All these programs which are there in our heart will be gradually weakened, and then ultimately, Adi Sankarshan, Balaram himself, the spiritual master, will make appearance within our heart. And he will say, he will prepare our heart by his discipline and his service to him. He will prepare us to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He will say how you should serve the Supreme Personality. He will teach us how we should serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then only Krishna will make appearance. And then we can see who is Vasudeva. Srila Prabhupada explains Vasudeva, Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam. Who is Vasudeva? Vasudeva is the manifestation of Vishuddha Sattva. When the lower modes of material nature are completely vanished and purified from our consciousness, and when the higher mode of material nature is also purged out, even material sattva should be purged out, and the spiritual transcendental sattva, which is completely pure sattva, descends, and this pure sattva is the energy of Krishna's existence and Krishna's consciousness. It's Krishna's Chit Shakti with his Sat Shakti together. Then only Krishna will make his appearance from the womb of Devaki, which is symbolically representing the heart of a sadhaka. So there is a Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, and this Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, and Prabhupada also explains that Devaki, position of Devaki, signifies the position of transcendence. When Devaki and Vasudeva unites, when the influx of Shuddha Sattva comes to our heart, only then we will be able to see the Lord directly. The Lord is there, but He will reveal Himself to us only when the heart is completely purified by the strict following of the rules. And therefore the character of Vasudeva is described. It is described in specifically in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Then when Vasudeva was born, all the demigods starting playing drums. Therefore, his other name was Anakadundubi. What Anakadundubi means? Anakadundubi means that all the demigods became joyful and jubilant, and they proclaimed, here is Vasudeva. He was born in this world because he is completely truthful. He is completely pure. He has all the good qualities. So, Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, it's very important, this purity of following Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is very important. The truthfulness of following Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is very important. The most important quality of Vasudeva is his truthfulness. He was so famous for being truthful that when he said to Kamsa Maharaj that I will bring all my newborn babies, don't worry. You will be able to do whatever you want to them. Don't kill Devaki. And Kamsa Maharaj immediately believed him. He didn't have a slightest trace of a doubt that Vasudeva will do, if he said this, he will do it. So this is one very important quality of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. It basically means the strictness of following the vows. If I promised I will do these vows, I will follow these vows on the path of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, it's extremely important to follow these vows. Then Krishna will reveal himself, how he revealed himself in the prison cell of Kamsa. This is basically why he revealed himself in this pure Aishwarya mood, to reciprocate with the similar mood of Vasudeva and Devaki. Vasudeva and Devaki, they had this Aishwarya Gyan. And therefore Krishna came to them and he said, for 12,000 years, he started saying about the past, their previous life and the life before that. For 12,000 years, you were Prishni and Prishni-garbha, Prishni and Sutapa, and you were doing this tapasya, and then I was born from you as Prishni-garbha, then you were Aditi and Kashyapa, and I was born as Vamanadev. And now I'm born for the third time because I appeared to you. And after the severe austerity which you performed, when you purified your heart, I appeared to you and what did you ask me? You asked me, we want to have son like you. And because nobody is like me, I was born to you. So this is all the description of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. We want to relate to God. We want to serve God in a certain way. But we also want to know that He is God. We want to know, to make sure that He is God. And therefore, He reveals Himself in such an opulent way, with 4 hands, with Srivatsa, with helmet, with all the decorations, with chakra, shankha, and gada, and lotus in His hands. And He speaks pure Sanskrit, and Devaki prays to Him. But at the same time, there is a little touch of Vatsalya Bhav in their heart. It's actually very moving and very touching. You know, Vasudeva, when he speaks to the Supreme Lord, he only glorifies Him and he says that you are the Supreme Creator. And then when Devaki starts speaking, she says, yes, you are controller of everyone, you are the time supreme, you are the supreme cause of all causes, but please become a baby. Why should I become a baby? Krishna asked her. Because I want to hide you from Kamsa. Krishna says, no, but why should you hide me from Kamsa? Call Kamsa, I will kill him. She said, no, you cannot kill Kamsa. No, I'm afraid. and then she says, please become a baby. And Krishna again asks, why should I become a baby? Because I'm afraid, and you should protect me from fear. I'm afraid for you. You know, please listen to this very complicated logic. It's not a very straightforward logic. I'm afraid that Kamsa will kill you, therefore you should become a baby so that I could hide you and in this way become peaceful again. Otherwise, I will be always fearful about you. You know, here's God Himself standing in front of you, but she wants to hide Him because that's her motherly love. But then she says, very beautiful thing. She sees that Krishna, who is standing in front of her in his full glory, is still not convinced. He is still not convinced that she wants him to become a baby. And she says, she gives the last argument to Krishna. She says, you know, if you don't become a baby, people will laugh at me. They will say, look, she had God in her womb. How is that possible? You know, this must be some story, you know. She couldn't have God in his womb. And when Krishna heard this argument, he became very small immediately. He became a little baby to pacify Devaki, to say Devaki that ultimately I want to fulfill your desire. And Krishna becomes a child because this desire is there, but because this desire is mixed very much with awe and reverence, with this grandeur, with this understanding, with this predominance in our heart to understand the opulent aspect of God. And we are all attached to this opulent aspect of God because we're so used and programmed to exploit His energy that we want His opulent manifestation. He reciprocates with our love. And for a small second, for a split second, for a few minutes, He becomes a baby. But it's so short time, Devaki doesn't even have time to take this little baby and put on her lap. Immediately, Vasudeva takes this baby, puts him on his head in a little basket and goes out. But still, he has this concept, I'm saving God. God is my son. I'm saving my son. He is the most dear. And he goes and he manifests his service attitude. He fulfills what God said to him. And God basically said to him, I don't want to... Basically what Krishna said to him, he said, I don't want to have much to do with you. Please bring me as soon as possible to Nanda and Yashoda, because I want to taste their love. And Vasudeva, of course, he brings Krishna, and everyone is very happy. You know, it is said that the clouds were rumbling in the sky. There was a little drizzle. You know, like usually at that time, we already entered this season in Vrindavan. Initially, there are heavy rains. There was supposed to be heavy rains. And then starts drizzling. Little drizzles are there. So the drizzles were there so that Krishna... And it's very pleasant because it's not heavy rain, but it's just little, like little cooling down device. And clouds were thinking, you know, let us serve the Lord. Nobody should see him, and therefore there was no light at all of the moon, and everyone was sleeping. Yogamaya put everyone asleep because everyone was basically sleeping in their sense gratifications. And then Anantashesha came to protect the Lord from the rain and from Yamuna. But the most important thing is the other event which also took place the day before yesterday. At the same time, also at 12 at night. You know, also the people who are following Raganuga Bhakti, and Nanda and Yashoda are the manifestations of Raganuga Bhakti sadhana, which is higher process to realize higher conception of God. The highest conception of God is that God is love, and that God wants to exchange love with the living entities, that God wants to become equal with the living entities. God wants to become on the equal footing with the living entities and reciprocate with their love. That's the highest possible conception of God. It's much higher than Brahman, it's much higher than Viratrupa, it's much higher than the multitude of demigods, it's much higher even than Paramatma, it's much higher than the opulent manifestation of God who is without any cause, personality of Godhead like Narayana in Vaikuntha, in this Paramam Padam. It's much higher than anything else. It's much higher than the conception of Vasudeva and Devaki, which has some element of sweetness and some personal touch. Why? Because love is the highest of all. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives a beautiful example, the most beautiful example. There are so many beautiful examples which our acharyas give. But he gives the most beautiful example. It's most amazing example. He says, let's say there is a woman and she gave a birth to an ugly son. And this son is ugly, he has bad behavior, he's always crying and he's sickly and, and still she loves him. And then there is a moon. And this moon, full moon, and it is shining, it's brilliant, it's perfect. It gives such a beautiful light. So, and you ask this woman whom she would prefer, this ugly little sun which she gave birth to, or this beautiful moon which is there high in the sky. What she will say? Without hesitation, she will say, of course, to my child. She will say, of course, my child is much more dear to me than the moon. The moon is perfect. The moon is higher up. The moon is giving his mercy and light and everything. The moon is so beautiful. No, but love is more beautiful, even if it's ugly. So, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, if the love to a human child is much greater than the love to the moon, how much greater is the love to the perfect Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is born as a child, then the relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is perfect and he is very high up and he is this opulent manifestation of himself. He says that because love is higher than anything else, the form of God which being revealed to someone who is in love is the highest possible form. And this highest possible form is revealed in the 10th Canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and in the whole of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And therefore, it is said in this verse, which is quoted in this section of Chaitanya Charitamrita, "Ete chamsha kalach pumsah Krishna stu Bhagavan Swayam." He is the child. Why he is the child? Because he is completely bound by the love of his devotees. His devotees' love is so strong that he cannot become different. He has to become weak child so that they can serve to him by all different means. And he is becoming, why? Because he's merciful. His main Shakti is mercy. And his fullest manifestation of his mercy is when he becomes a little child in Gokul, in Nandagram, in Varshana, when he runs in Govardhan. That's the highest possible manifestation of God. And there is only one way to realize this, only one sadhana to realize this. And there is only one extent of surrender which helps us to realize this. We should be surrendered 108% towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No personal consideration whatsoever. Think only about his benefit, his pleasure, his happiness, not about our happiness. Like Mother Yashoda, she's ready to die 100 millions of times so that Krishna is happy, so that, every hairs in his body are intact. She's so completely in love with him. Kavi Karnapur, when he describes this Krishna Janmashtami, this amazing Leela of Krishna Janmashtami, he says that when Mother Yashoda saw this manifestation of the supreme beauty born from her, when she woke up from her yoga nidra, from her mystic slumber, from her dream, which she was put by Yoga Maya, so that Vasudeva could do his business, his exchange business of Krishna, Vasudeva Krishna, which was born from him, and Nandanandana Krishna, who were merged together, or rather they were merged in the prison cell of Kamsa, but that's another story. They were merged at this moment when Devaki Mata felt the intense influx of motherly love. At that time, Yoga Maya transferred Nandanandana Krishna, who was already born from Yashoda, to the prison cell of Kamsa, and Vasudeva Krishna merged into the body of Nandanandana Krishna, and therefore immediately Vasudeva transferred him back to Gokul, where he belongs, from where he didn't go anywhere. So anyway, it's a very intricate story how our acharyas reconcile the version. But what I want to tell, I started telling how Mother Yashoda was looking at this beauty personified. She was looking, she couldn't believe her eyes. He was blue like Atasi flower. Atasi is a lin, is how you call this? Very blue flower, like sapphire. And he was effulgent, and he was like a gem, transparent. So she was looking and looking, and she couldn't understand. She just saw only beautiful lotuses and beautiful manifestations, all kinds of beauty she saw in her child. And then she saw her own reflection in the child, because the child was so effulgent that her reflection was there. And she became afraid because she saw that some witch came to attack her child. And she started chastising this witch. She says, get out of here. This is my child. I will protect this child. So this protective love of Mother Yashoda, completely oblivious of any opulence, makes Krishna to appear as a baby. And that's the highest conception. And we can only realize this conception if we follow the footsteps of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. We have to clearly study their character. As I explained in my little talk today, the qualities of Vasudeva, how the main quality of Vasudeva is his truthfulness. His complete, total surrender to the vows which he has given. In the same way, what are the main qualities of Nanda Yashoda? Nanda is very generous. It is explained everywhere that he's very generous. He's ready to share his child with everyone. He's not possessive. Vasudeva is very possessive. Because of fear, he brings Krishna to Gokul. But when Krishna finally came to Mathura, he didn't want him to go back to Vrindavan. But Nanda Maharaj said, yes, of course, he belongs to Vasudeva. He's very generous. It's because of his generosity that he became the king of all the cowherds. Actually, his elder brother, Upananda, was supposed to be the king. But because everyone loved Nanda, why everyone loved Nanda? Because he was so joyful and he was giving joy to everyone. That's the meaning of his name. Nanda was giving Ananda. What is Ananda? Nanda is joy. Ananda with short A is grief. Ananda with long A in the beginning. Ananda is the supreme joy. The double negation emphasizes the meaning of the original word. So Nanda is joy, and he is giving this supreme joy. Ananda is being born from Nanda. Nanda is joyful himself. He's very generous, and he's very careful. He's caring about all his subjects, and everyone loves him. And Vasudeva, he's there in the prison cell, and sometimes Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, it's like this. But Raganuga sadhana bhakti, it's called pushti mark. It's very generous. We're supposed to cook 108 preparations on Janmashtami. I don't know how many preparations you cooked. We here in our little kitchen cooked 90 preparations almost. And then we were totally exhausted and fell down. But anyway, this is the generous nature of Raganuga sadhana. It's generous. Generous nature means it's not that you should chant 16 rounds only. It's not Raganuga sadhana. It's Vaidhi sadhana. Vaidhi sadhana means only 16 rounds. I gave my vow. Not even one round more. Therefore, the proper vow is at least 16 rounds. So that if you chant 17 rounds, you're not breaking your vows. So, yeah. But Raganuga sadhana, you chant all the time. That's Raganuga. If you tell Nanda Maharaj, you chant the name of your son only 16 rounds, he will not believe it. He will always call his son. Because it's generous nature, it's expanding, and it wants to invite everyone else to participate in this festival of joy, which is Krishna. And yesterday we were celebrating this Nandotsava. Nandotsava is this festival which Ananda Maharaj arranged. Vasudeva, in his heart, he gave 10,000 cows to brahmanas. That's what he did. And Nanda Maharaj, he gave, it is said that in his courtyard there was mountains of jewels, mountains of gold, mountains of everything, mountains of sesame seeds. And he was just giving and giving and giving and giving. So that's the mood. That's actually the mood. And Srila Prabhupada, he was a Raganuga sadhaka. He was giving. In this mood he came. He was not stingy. He was very generously distributing this highest conception of God and highest sadhana of God. And most important, who is Yashoda? Yashoda is, what is the name? What does the name Yashoda means? Yashoda. Yasha means fame, and Da means the one who gives the fame. It basically means that another quality, if we want Krishna to be born within our heart, if we want to realize this highest conception of God, then one of our practices should be that we should give fame to others. It basically means that we should glorify others. When somebody has stingy heart, it's very difficult for him to glorify others. He only wants to glorify himself and he wants to hear his own glorification. But the devotee who follows this path, he always glorifies Krishna. And he always glorifies the other devotees. He says, "You are pure devotee." He never sees faults in other people, because that completely changes the atmosphere within the heart. You cannot really practice the real form of bhakti if you see the faults in other people. If you're obsessed with seeing the deficiencies and faults in other people, you cannot practice this bhakti, this Raganuga sadhana. And Yashoda means also that she gave the fame of being Krishna's mother to Devaki. If you ask anyone in this world, who is Krishna's mother, from whom Krishna was born, everyone will say, nobody will say Yashoda. Maybe few Gaudiya Vaishnavas will say Yashoda, but everyone says, yes, he was born from Devaki. But Krishna himself couldn't be born from Devaki. Krishna, Gokul Nandana Krishna, Yashoda Nandana Krishna, Nanda Nandana Krishna, he could not be born from Devaki because he could only be born from Yashoda. Because her love is much greater. Her conception of God is much more greater. And because her conception of God, her desire to reciprocate with God in a specific way is of such high quality, then Krishna can only be born to her. But she's generously and very freely, she gives this fame to Devaki. And that basically means that, those real bhaktas, real Vaishnavas, they don't want to be glorified. They want others to be glorified. They always point at the glory of other people. They say, they have bhakti, I don't have bhakti. If somebody says he has bhakti, he doesn't have bhakti. But if somebody says he doesn't have bhakti, well, he may not have bhakti, but at least there is a chance that he has bhakti. But if somebody says, I have bhakti, he has no bhakti whatsoever. So that's Yashoda, that's her love, and that's the highest conception, and that's the highest practice. That's the highest form of practice, which helps us to realize the highest form of God. And it implies the highest level of surrender. Because in this relationship, distant relationship with God, we still can maintain our separate identity. In the highest form of worship, there is no question of separate identity. There is no way to maintain the separate identity. I don't want to exist separately at all. I can only be, I only have anything good in myself because I'm connected with God, with you, with little Krishna. And because I'm connected with you, little Krishna, I'm happy. That's my only source of livelihood. That's my only source of existence. That's my only source of happiness. That's my only source of everything else. I do not have any separate existence. And that's surrender. That's Sharanagati. Ananya-gatitva, the main characteristics of Sharanagati is complete gatitva. When Ananya-gatitva, I don't have any other gati, any other interest in life, any other shelter in life. My only gati, my only shelter, my only ashraya is Krishna himself. Who is Krishna? Krishna, this baby Krishna in Vrindavan, who is the most beautiful and the most opulent at the same time form of God. And when this concept is there in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and when we realize that this is the highest form of concept of God, highest doctrine, then we can gradually, first by following the rules and regulations of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, develop this greed for this personal relationship with this most personal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Krishna Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. And I wanted to, at the end of this little, not such a little, long class, I'm really sorry for this long class, but I want to quote from Vedanta Sutra. It's a very beautiful Vedanta Sutra from Vedanta Sutra. Tan nirdharaya aniyamas tadrisheh prithak gi apratibandha palam. When somebody, basically, this sutra answers the question, should we only worship Krishna or should we worship some other forms of God as well? And this sutra says, no, there is no rule that you should only worship Krishna. You can worship any form of Bhagavan because they all Bhagavan. They all personality of Godhead. They all very highly developed understanding. If I understand that God is person for himself, how he enjoys himself by assuming these forms and reciprocating with his particular devotees, it's a very high position. So it is said that there is no such rule that you should only worship Krishna. But prithak gi apratibandha palam. But the worship of Krishna, but if you start worshiping Krishna, it gives you a very specific palam, the fruit. The pal of worship Krishna is very specific because it removes all the obstacles in your worship. Bandha means obstacles, apratibandha. If you, this is the special kind of worship. If we worship Krishna, then Krishna himself, or this worship, or this mood which we have developed, if we want to worship Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna in this form, it's very special because it removes all the obstacles from our path. And when the obstacles, all the other obstacles from our path are removed, we can worship Krishna himself, or if we have inclination, we can worship somebody else. But what is said there, that the specific worship to Krishna, please listen very, very carefully. It has a very specific quality. If we realize who is Krishna, all the obstacles to our worship will be removed. the greed to obtain this particular sweet relationship with this form of God will be overwhelming. And because of this overwhelming greed within our heart, there will be no obstacles in our worship to God. And ultimately we come to Him, and ultimately there will be no need to worship anyone else. We will only want to worship this little Vrindavan Krishna, who never leaves Vrindavan, who always wants to taste the love of his devotees. And in this way, initially we start by following the rules and regulations. Therefore, these two leelas are described simultaneously in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. They are all important. We cannot immediately jump to this Yashoda Leela and Janma Leela in Vrindavan. No way. Therefore, even the first Leela is described much more elaborately in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, whereas the second Leela, its subsequent events are described more elaborately. So we start worshipping Krishna from this Vaidhi sadhana worship. But we also know what Krishna wants. Krishna wants us to bring him to Vrindavan. And we also want to bring him to Vrindavan. And we also want to come together with him to Vrindavan. And we also want to stay with him in Vrindavan. So for a short while, we can worship Krishna in this mood of awe and reverence, but ultimately we should develop the greed of the inhabitants of Vrindavana and try to love Krishna the same way as they love. When they know that Krishna is God. They have this knowledge perfectly well. They know Krishna is God, but they don't care about this. Nanda Maharaj knows that Krishna is God. Yashoda Mai knows that Krishna is God. Srimati Radharani knows that Krishna is God. They all know. Sometimes they speak about this, but they don't care. For them, it's not important. For them, what is more important is that he is their son, and everything else is not important. Everything else they don't care about. So when we understand this concept, which is the main message or doctrine of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the rest of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is written to rectify this concept, for us to understand this concept in comparison with everything else, so that everything else will become pale in comparison with this. That everything else becomes less attractive. So then we will be able to understand who is God, then we will be able to practice this, and then we will be able to develop this complete surrender to Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is exactly what Srila Śrīdhara Svāmī says in the first verse which we read. Daśame daśamam lakṣyam āśrita-tāśraya-vigraham śrī-kṛṣṇākhyaṁ param dhamma jagat-dhāma namāmi tat. So that's what I try to explain today, that we have to understand that by the means of Brahma Gyan or Jnana Yoga, we can realize the aspect of Sat, we can realize the existence of God. It's a very important realization. By this means we will be, now we may have doubts. We may have all this beautiful philosophy, but we still may doubt. And I knew devotees who were devotees and then they became Buddhists. No, God doesn't exist. Why? Because they didn't realize the aspect of Sat. So the aspect of Sat has to be realized first. And that's the indistinct understanding of God, but very clear understanding that God is there as the cause of all causes. By yoga meditation, by controlling ourselves, which is also part, controlling of our mind, we can realize the aspect of Sat and Chit. And these aspects of Sat and Chit, this is the characteristics of Paramatma. This is how Paramatma works in this world, by manifesting these two qualities. The Supreme Consciousness, which is ruling everything, and the existence. Then, by the means of bhakti yoga, we can realize Satchit and Ananda. But by the means of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, we can realize partial Ananda, very small portion of blissful nature of God. But when we start getting into the mood of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, ultimately we will be able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Satchitananda in complete form. And only in this path we will be able to fully experience the Ananda of God. Okay, that's it. I don't want to bewilder you more. I am sorry for such a long class.
You don't have to, please. I think I really personally want to say that this is probably, after a long time, one of the best katha on Śrī Kṛṣṇa Janmashtami. And you've really taken us through a fantastic journey of, as if, kind of, a surgical operation of where we are and where we need to really get to. You gave us a glimpse of what the real destination and shelter is. So it was really wonderful. Every second and minute of this katha was captivating indeed, in as much as the personality of Godhead is captivating. So on that note, there are some questions, Maharaj.
Let us do it next time, okay? Please keep these questions or send it to me and I will try. Because it's a little late.
Sure. All right.
Okay.
And so we'll keep the questions for next time. That's perfectly fine. But if there's anything quickly from any of the participants, devotees, if they want to say something, Jugal Kishore Prabhu, Anupama, Apurva, anyone, please feel free before we end the session today. Okay, so I think, Maharaj, we will. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
What a beautiful lecture. We could listen to you all day and all night long.
You are becoming like Maharaja Parikshit.
It was so nice listening, and we wish you could keep speaking. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hare
So
Krishna.
on behalf of all the devotees who attended today's session and the devotees on YouTube, we thank you again, Maharaj, for your kind association. We are indeed honored, privileged, and feel very fortunate that you took out time for us and taking us. I wish to say that this today's lecture, every other lecture of yours is very there is an urge, but in this lecture there's even further surge for us to, if I were to just encapsulate one point that you made, you underscored, was conception, the practice, which is sadhana, and the quality of practice is dependent upon the surrender, which is related to the conception, and obviously that leads to the realization. And clearly I have to say, I felt more neophyte than ever before. I always was in that situation. And thank you so very much in showing me the mirror. And we look forward that we continue to seek your association and be able to uplift my consciousness and everyone else who's in attendance. They could also take away.
So what I will do next time I will, because as far as I understood, I explained the third canto, overview of third canto. So I will explain in more detail this philosophy of Sankhya, which is very important. And I will prepare the special PowerPoint presentation for this, so that something which I only touched in my previous class, I will explain in more detail next time.
Really fantastic.
And then
we wish to all let you know, Maharaj, that we've had Kishori Mataji prepare PowerPoints of 2 of your lectures, Apurva. Is that correct?
I have seen one,
Okay.
and she's, I think, working on the others, and we are also doing the transcriptions of the 4th lecture. So we should be done in a few weeks, I think.
okay. Okay, I hope I'll prepare the PowerPoint for the next class. Okay.
Maharaj, thank you. Again, please accept our most respectful obeisances.
Āśrita-
Vancha kalpadurubhyascha kripasinubhya evacha.
Um,